This is a show about facing fear, unlocking courage, and taking action.
Courage isn't necessarily a daunting thing.
It's going to give you more purpose. It's going to give you more drive.
It feels like making a courageous decision is going to get you closer to who you aspire to be.
It's knowledge plus faith plus action equals courage.
Holding the commitment to building a better kind of capitalism as I get more senior, trying to not let certain norms normalize themselves for me within my practice and my leadership. That's my biggest fear, is not staying true to that promise. And I do think that I will, but it's like the fear that motivates me.
Well, folks, this episode is like 6 years in the making. It might be really like 3 years in the making. This has been a 1,000-day march to finally get my guest on the pod. And to be fair, it's not like, it's just life. It's just life. It's all good. It's cool when you see someone from afar, and if you know me, you know that I will do this. If I see something bold on LinkedIn, if I see someone post something, then I'm like, yes. They're not just doing it to be audacious. They're doing it because it's their point of view, and it's like, it's a belief. Then I probably 4 times a year will reach out to that person and go, yes, thank you. This is exactly how I feel. Why aren't more people doing this? And I'd say I have a pretty good hit rate also on people that aren't afraid to be themselves, to be like, oh, yes, yeah, courageousness or braveness or boldness, and hearing back from them. And I think that's kind of how Elle McCarthy, like, that's how we kind of hit it off right out of the gate. I didn't ask you to be anyone but yourself. I think you can see that, for better or for worse, this is me on a Monday, on a Thursday, on a Sunday. It doesn't matter what the day is, right? And so, one, I wanted to say thank you. Like, in some ways, you are exactly what great marketing is. It is finding a way to break through the noise by being genuine and distinct. And that's what brought me to you. And it's like, we share a lot of the same belief system, and here you are. I would describe you all, before I kind of pass it over to you. I feel like you do sit at this, I don't like this word because we overuse it, this intersection, right? This cross of brand, of growth, of performance, of creativity, and transformation. We need one of those really wonky intersections. But do you feel like that's an honest depiction of who you are? Is that a good place to start?
Well, I think the place that you ended is the place that I'd say is like who I am, transformation in so many aspects. And it's what I bring to my work, but it's also just what I value. Like, when I was studying many years ago, I loved Ovid's Metamorphoses, which is all of the Greek myths about incredible moments of transformation. I'm really interested in the Wicca traditions and witchcraft and tarot. I think I told you that last time we met. And transformation in aim of personal growth, but also just like believing that we can change the things that seem unchangeable. And so that belief that extends from like my belief in magic the whole way through to how I build brands based on cultivating the internal belief that change is possible, and have often, I think, been able to do things to brands with brands that haven't been done before, or defy the expectations of the steady group of people who I've met who say, that's not worked before, that doesn't work here, that won't be possible.
It's like, what are you doing, people? You're like, oh, okay, yep, that's I would immediately go into that spot. It's kind of like when you pull the dog chain, like I have dogs, like if we're walking on a leash, then the dog wants to go immediately the other way for all obvious reasons. I love that you use the word magic. I think we've had this chat before too, that magic is a core value at Courageous. And what I've always loved about magic, I mean, well, for one, I think most of our competitors are really good at making you think. They're less thoughtful when it comes to making you feel. And anytime you see something from a magician, you're like, do it again. Like, how did you do that? And what people miss is it's not a trick. It's not a trick. Like, the magician is trained to do the thing to make you feel something. You've described yourself in the past, and I'm curious to hear if you still would go with this term, as a little bit of a Swiss Army knife when it comes to problem solving. Do you still feel that's true for you?
Yeah, I think it is that transformation through line, but also just like where I come from in my career is that I was a craft trained strategist who was also an art school dropout, who studied then art history in a brand new art history course that had never been taught before. I was the first year of intake for this course, and it pulled together all of the different critical faculties of the humanities. So I studied some English with the English Lit department, some history with the history department, fine art with the School of Ruskin, critical art theory. And so lots of different theoretical practices and ways of thinking felt like an amazing playground to then go and become a strategist. And so I love taking on problems in areas that I haven't encountered before. I think in my last few roles, I've done brand and something completely new. So at EA, I started doing brand and marketing operations. Then I took on social impact, like the actual social impact team. And I was able to apply strategic process to uplift employee engagement in volunteering programs by 20% within a really short period of time by bringing some strategy and some creativity and making it feel like a cultural thing that people could be a part of rather than a workplace program, as it had previously been defined. And in my last role at Ford, I also had merchandising and licensing. And so we imagined some very different brand partnerships. Through that, I went and sat with Mattel and got to stand inside a full life Barbie dream house and was like, oh, I wonder what could be. And so, yes, in where I had been trained in advertising and creative, but then in the application to other things, a little bit of strategy, creativity, and magic, which I define more in a witchy sense than I do in a magician sense, because there is the witch definition of magic. Chaos magic is my preferred definition. And it's just the idea that, to vastly oversimplify it, it's the idea that there are all of these energetic forces. Some people might think of them as religious forces. Some people might think of them as fate. Some people might think of them as karma. But it's the idea that it is possible to channel them, basically. And so I love that definition. It's like seeing the unseen, which might be like the possibilities that you can create, right? So to take it again to a witchcraft place, I think it's just really front of mind for me sitting in my witchy garden. But yeah. Creativity, strategy, and a bit of magic is what I think drives being a Swiss Army knife.
When you find yourself at a place like Ford or PayPal, how much are you smirking when it comes to magic? Do you think that's why they hire you, because you're a different note to what they might have? Or are you showing some semblance of restraint? No, they're hiring you because you understand brand and you understand strategy, and you can be ready and put together. But at the end of the day, you know that you're going to bring a little bit of pixie dust and witch magic, chaos magic, as you said, to the table.
I definitely don't talk about chaos magic and witchcraft practices in interview.
Maybe leave that off the table for the second interview.
Yeah. But I think the nice thing about having a track record for creating unexpected change is that you lean into the track record. And then also when I'm talking about unseen energy, I want to build belief in an employee base. I'll often say brands are built from the inside out. The trick is to get everybody to believe, to crystallize what the brand could be, and then get everybody to believe that both that it's possible and that it's valuable and that they can play a role in it. So every single person is empowered to play that role. And so that's also why I go really far and wide in terms of where the brand shows up and gets enabled, or the inputs. And it should include things like customer service and like how we talk in a customer service mode, or going and finding all of the problems that exist in parts of the business that might be less glamorous or not connected to marketing, and then bringing that back into the process and looking at a strategy as a set of tools that needs to be built bespoke for any situation and that needs to solve real problems. And so that's how I talk about it. I'm like, we need to build belief in the employee base, which means that the brand needs to be brought to life internally before or as it is brought to life externally. And also we need to solve real problems. And so we should take these problems and then apply brand as a set of strategic tools. And when it can start solving the problems, that's when we know the right set of tools for the business. And obviously a lot of the ability to do that is based on intuition, reading what's possible. I definitely don't describe it as magic, but I think it is.
So I want to get to McAfee here in a minute. Okay, this is my way of saying we're not at McAfee yet, because I'm very curious, like what I'm sure there's stuff you won't be able to share, but like what can you share that's, you're like, okay, I see an opportunity here. We could be better here. We could double down here. You had talked about the idea of like unexpected change. And, let's take this through the lens of brand building. In your opinion, what has changed most about brand building? And then the irony, the opposite, like what will never change about brand building?
Well, I think the thing that's changed the most about brand building is the role of brand as a strategic anchor, like the relationship between brand and corporate strategy. And I don't necessarily mean a corporate strategy team, but I mean how a CEO and an executive leadership team articulate what the strategic levers are for growth, disruption, not being disrupted, disproportionately winning, no matter what that means to a company. Often they will be outlined in terms that are hard for employees to understand, or not translated into the actions that everybody would need to take in order to get there. And often they'll just be articulated as financial goals. Big numbers. And then the idea is you pull all of these tiny levers and the big numbers change, right? You test them. And everybody has access to, all of your competitors have access to, the desire to win market share and all of the tiny levers that you can pull. And so, what brand will always do, the universal quality of brand that won't change, is it is your lever to disproportionately win in the pulling of all the levers, right? It is the thing that will help you win above and beyond the competition, which is most brands' definition of winning, whether the competition is something out of category or whether the competition is a traditional competitor set. And so, very simply helping business leaders to understand that brand is a measure of preference. It reduces price sensitivity. It is, what has people reaching for you or converting when you, all of that education I think is really important. But then the translation to the employee base, which is where corporate strategy never actually pays itself off. That's what brand does, I think, as a strategic anchor, when it is enabled as a strategic anchor. And I wouldn't say that that's how brand building has changed. I would say that there is a small handful of brand builders who think the way I do about brand. And there is an even smaller handful of CEOs and boards who want that,
Totally.
or know to want it. So I'd like it to be more universally understood. that brand can translate your corporate strategy into your employee base, and that it is the tide that raises all ships, the lever that affects all the levers. Historically, it's been, what does your logo look like? It's been much more superficial. People often think my job is
Totally.
branding. That is part of it. But brand and branding are really different. And sometimes I've been called the branding team, and I'm like, oh, whoa. Let's talk about the difference between the noun and the verb, because it's really important.
Yeah, to me, this is the disappointing part of this conversation. Is it's a conversation that's been going on since I've been in business.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I think to your point, brand is a path to constructing a better kind of capitalism, right? It truly is about the dollars and cents here. And if I want to share my sob story, which you know a little bit of, right? Like, I deeply believe in brand. I actually think companies like Brandless, which are no longer, we're trying to like work against, like, don't pay for brand. It's like, no, like exactly what you said. It's like not brand less. It's like understand your brand and understand what it could do for all facets of the business. It's not just a superficial logo. But I think it's kind of like somewhere between sad and courageous that I had to go from an agency owner and rebrand myself just to be trusted by C-suites as a courage expert to like then get in and talk about, look, creativity and business and how these two worlds play together. And I've never seen myself as a business guy, and I've never seen myself as a creative. I'm a creative business guy. So I think it's the same conversation, right? And how do you go about, I mean, because look, you need to work too, right? Like, when you're getting interviewed for a job, what sort of detective work are you doing back to make sure your belief system is in violation of a better kind of capitalism?
Yeah. I mean, actually, I asked 2 questions, like particularly in interviews with C-suite. And it's, what's your definition of brand?
Oh, I can't wait to hear what you hear. What do you, like, I'm assuming you hear everything, but like, is there an answer that you just sit up on?
Oh, I mean, it's been so different. I mean, at EA, it was like, we've never done this before. We know, we think we know we need it. What is it? But what I loved in that conversation was that they were really open to me defining it. To me consulting, and it wasn't like a open path, like you can just say what it is and that will be enabled. It was very much a like build the business case, prove and do, but open to the definition of what the value drivers would be. The fact that that was wide open for me to define was part of what was compelling. At PayPal, we were, Leanne Sheraton, who was the CMO at the time, and I were just hyper focused on bringing together and bringing back a B2B brand that was a collection of brands and offerings that were totally not understood. The thing that was compelling about that was, in many ways, the same thing, well, in one way, the same thing that's very compelling about the McAfee challenge, which is incredibly famous brand for the wrong things against their business objectives and their growth trajectory. So in the world of B2B, they had a lot of salespeople who would call up any of the large enterprises who weren't using PayPal for business, and they would say, "But we want to talk to you about our PayPal for business offering." And they were like, "Why are you calling? We've got the PayPal button." And PayPal was like, no, because they had, a developer sandbox. They had all of these things. They had all of Braintree. They had, full stack, full service, disconnected, disjointed though, because it hadn't been brought together into one platform yet. But the lack of understanding of what they could do for businesses versus the unprompted spontaneous awareness was such an amazing delta, like a huge challenge, but also an incredible opportunity. At Ford, the answer to how do you define brand was exactly what I had always been looking for, like my whole career, including the stint that I had done at Ford on the agency side, when I had been trying to enable new global brand, but not at the time against the right breed. It just wasn't the right era of the company. But in that interview, I remember like afterwards being like, oh my God, is this real? Because Lisa's response was, well, we're really looking for a brand strategy that is a meaningful strategic blueprint for decision making. She had a background in product development as well. And so she was like, it really needs to help us decide like which vehicles we're going to make and help resolve things like what do we do in the world of EVs, which now that the new EV platform has been announced, which was it was done in conjunction with the brand work, I can say. But we talked about marketing last. And people will say like, oh my God, like congratulations, are you so proud of Ready Set Forward? And I'm like, yes, but I'm much more proud of the huge strategic infrastructural shifts that were made for every single business unit, and all of the work that is happening now to enable new product and new ways of thinking and new design systems based on the brand segmentation and aspirational lifestyle audiences that we brought into the business. So that definition was perfect and so exciting. So I'm not looking for anything in particular, but it was amazing to find what I would be looking for if I was trying to bounce between, perfect states of brand definition.
So you're out here on the West Coast with me. Granted, you're a little bit more north than me. Although I'm finally coming up to the Bay Area. I'll let you know when I'm coming up your way. But so you're at McAfee and you have this new challenge in front of you. So far, so good. I mean, how long have you been with the brand now?
6 months.
Okay, is it what you thought it would be? What have you learned? Tell me a little bit about what energizes you about the assignment at hand.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say we're still in a spot where I'll be excited to share some stuff when I can share it. And there's not a lot that I can share right now, but I can definitely share what energizes me. Because McAfee is a tech company that only does good things with people's data. And not only does it promise that, the things that it's doing are so important as the world evolves to be full of even more threats. And so, one of the things about the cybersecurity category is a sort of dusty old category in many ways. And McAfee, when I tell people that I work at McAfee, they will say one of three things. They'll say like, oh, they're still doing stuff, or they'll say, antivirus, or they'll want to talk to me about the documentary. And none of them are relevant. We have 94% brand awareness, and it's pretty much all for the wrong things. And we also have the largest lapsed audience base of any of the competition because they've had an experience with us in the past. But the company that we are and the company that we're becoming is a direct-to-consumer company that keeps people safe in a myriad of ways. And that's true today. If you log into McAfee, if you go and look at the offering, we protect people across all of these different risk surfaces. We're able to tell you if a QR code is risky because that's a way that people can bring people into malicious links. We can highlight that a text is a scam, even if it doesn't contain a malicious link, because of the urgency and the tone. Like we're checking for all of these things that no individual platform is able to check for. And meanwhile, people think that scams and online threats are something that they should really educate their parents about or their aunt. It's something for the older generation. It's not for people like me. I'm too savvy. But actually, it's everybody who's at risk now. And with AI, the ability to scam people is becoming, exponential because people can create agents. They can create 200 agents that can break passwords that weren't able to break passwords before. And so it's really important. It's really meaningful. I described it as like quietly important. It's a quietly very important field.
Yes.
And I love that. I think it's really interesting space. It's it's an AI role that is doing something really meaningful to protect people against an AI wave of threats, which also feels like, a nice way to be in AI right now. Yeah.
I'm curious what your, like, when I think about your mission there, because I imagine it's very different. I mean, look, you're at Ford. There's, whether you're there live or not, you got a marketer to your right and a marketer to your left. There's a brand person to your right and a brand person to your left. I could be wrong on this, but at McAfee, I have to imagine that you're kind of, how do you delicately get everybody on the train of what brand means to you, on where you're taking brand and why brand matters? Or am I off on this? Are they more like your EA comment, like they know they need it? Or do they see it and get it? And again, I don't want to belittle anybody at McAfee, right?
It's sort of a combination. I'm definitely not sort of out there on my own trying to push a vision that other people are resistant to. I'd say it's like old name, new company in many ways, right? Went private 5 years ago, direct to consumer mandate and remit, relatively new CEO, relatively new CMO, a team of really smart, mission-driven people coming together who are motivated by the same mission that I am. So it's, a little less, in some ways, Ford is 177,000 person organization. I think that
Yeah.
I'm right about that number. It's big, very, very big. And it's got a huge, incredible legacy. And it's also a family business that still has family involvement. And that's actually one of the things that's amazing about it, because it gives it so much heart. But also it's one of the reasons why staying true to legacy is going to always be so important to Ford, and holding those two things together is so important to Ford. And there are also, in some pockets of the business, some people who struggle with change. McAfee is a bit different because it's actually, relatively lean, and the people who are there leading the charge really want to be there and have made that choice recently. And so I feel like I'm part of a group of people who are doing something amazing together. And then also, brand hasn't been enabled at McAfee this way before. And like I said, there's only a small handful of people I know who think about enabling brand like me. So I loved when I met the CMO, Stephanie Fried, that it was a really great open conversation about like how I think about it, how I would enable it. I love something that Craig says a lot, Craig's the CEO, about, how our mission is to bring more safety to more people, and that, being a mainstream brand and reaching the mass market is really important. And so I like that the mission was there already. Brand is seen as an enabler of it. And how we do that is something that I've been given the opportunity to define. So yeah, it's almost in a way like a combination of what I was saying about EA and what I was saying about Ford.
Well, also, I liked your, I'm a big believer of, what a surprise, the lexicon guy likes words, right? So when you see a word, that it'd be interesting how you bring the quiet component to life here, right? Because,
Yeah,
right, you said, what'd you say? Quietly
important.
Right? So some marketers see the job as, well, if we're going to go mainstream, middle finger quiet, right? Like but it's more about discipline, probably. Like it's discipline in choosing where there's a confidence to quiet, there's a calmness to quiet, there's a know-how to quiet. Is that part of the rollout, or is quiet more still quiet, right? It's like at some point, I mean, EA, in my opinion, loud. Ford, granted it's an EV, loud, not quiet, right? Like I might not be
Yeah.
here, right? So what is the strategy to taking something that's quietly important and delicately with discipline bring that to market?
Yeah. Well, the strategy that we've been working on itself definitely brings that to life, but I can't talk about it yet. Uh, but I think I mean, I said this at Ford as well. One of Ford's objectives has always been to be trusted. That was true when I worked on the brand before. Um, and in my most recent time with the company. And so I've always been talking about how, being trusted is, it's a little bit like the old adage, don't tell me you're funny, make me laugh, right? Um, and that was true in how we position Ford to be trusted as well, but leaning into capability as the number one thing that we make people feel. And if they feel that we will make them more capable, they will trust us. Here, I think, how you talk about safety and security is the driver of whether people will trust you to be the person who protects them. Um, and also, people need to know that we're not the company that they thought we were, and haven't been for, a while now too. So, I think that comes down to tone. And, I've been working a lot on a very detailed tone of voice. Like I was saying, brand is a suite of tools, and different ones are important in different ways in different moments and for different companies. I think tone is really important for McAfee as a driver of being trusted, which I'd say is the objective there. For me, like quietly important was like when I sat with like, do I want to do this job, and what are the things that are really appealing to me about it? I think somebody else might have said it to me. It honestly might have even been my therapist. Um, but like the idea for me that this is quietly important work, it felt like a really grounding
Yeah.
reason to be excited by the opportunity.
I can see there's so much you can play with all three of those: quietly important and then quietly important. They all have like
Yeah.
um a great starting ground. I love this stuff. So thank you for sharing a little bit and humoring me with allowing me to pepper in. Let's talk about you as a leader, because I don't know if you would say this. I don't know if we haven't had this chat in the past, but you of course have changed as roles have come on. Like, of course you've changed as, you've taken on new roles. And I mean, I don't know if you want to talk about this too, but you're a mama, like that. How has that changed you as a leader? And so here we are, right? Like here we are in the present, but how you arrived here is by going through some serious different, whether it was agency or EA or PayPal or Ford, like you said, 170 plus thousand employees. How you show up there is very different than how you show up for your little, right? So I'm curious, like when you just think about, and I want to talk about what it means to be a mom to you, and how that's like your own passion in that arena, but just from a leadership perspective, give me one thing you've personally had to unlearn to become the leader you are in this role.
I feel like I established my leadership style when I was in agencies, and agency leaders have a lot more permission. Also in the UK, agency leaders have a lot more permission to be creative, to be informal, it is also a very like active coaching style of leadership on the agency side, because the currency of agencies is talent and creative output and excellence. And I was trained in agencies like BBH, where there's like a set way of doing things. And it's a combination of, smart, talented, creative people being really informal with each other and, marrying each other and being friends with each other, and the lines between what's professional and what's personal. There were no lines, also in the era that I grew up in agencies. And I will say that was not always a good thing. But for me, being able to really be myself at work, it wasn't something, I remember coming to the States in the era of like, bring your whole self to work. And I was like, wait, and we weren't doing that, because I always have. And then, yeah, like I said, within that environment, which I think is, high collaboration, high accountability, high trust, but also everybody is just razor focused on the craft and the outcome and the excellence, very active coaching, educational coaching. A lot of feedback is given in public forums, and
For better or for worse.
yeah, and also, and I saw it be given in all kinds of ways, including like ACDs, like throwing things at people, like the stuff that I saw in agencies in the UK. I, though, took what I liked about that, and I am a active coach, craft oriented, and all about the excellence. And I think one of the things that I'm not unlearning it. That is always going to be who I am as a leader. But when I have to enable the level of change that I have to enable, which is, often super, super steep, and also, being in roles where I'm very senior and I have a lot of authority, which I have to remember because I hold the responsibility that I have to people and their livelihoods, but I also am not, showing up every day with the identity of my title, right? And so understanding that doing a lot of trust building is really important. Saying that to people, my style is active coaching, this will be different, telling the story of the change that we're going to make together and why that's so exciting and the role that everyone will play in it. That's really important to build like healthy and safe foundations to then show up carrying so much craft in environments where there haven't been craft leaders before, right? I think that's a really important thing in a world. I go into a lot of companies where there's a lot of very talented marketing generalists who've worked with a lot of agencies. And sometimes my job is to in-house. And that means that you're carrying craft and feedback is your currency in a much greater way. And I think that that's always going to be a learning curve for me, but I think I'm able to express it in a way in this role that I hadn't so actively thought about before.
I mean, I heard intentionality, I heard co-creation, and I heard safety. And, it's funny for a guy that has a brand called Courageous, that 9 out of 10 times, my only role is to create the conditions, which is basically safety, right? Like, hey, we have a hard conversation we need to have, right? Let me make sure everyone knows we can have it. And there's no watch outs or I'm going to get outed or is this a trap? Is this a trick? I've seen this before. I've heard this before. And it's like, how do you go about doing that? By keeping it real, right? By being a mirror in some places, but also in like creating like, well, what do we want to do together with this? I don't know if I'm just hungry. I actually talked about this a little earlier today too, but the best metaphor I have is like when you take a frozen piece of steak out of the freezer, right? It's like you can't just start by like, we got to like first just let it thaw out a little bit. And then we can move into let's marinate and then we can start cooking with fire. And I think that's kind of what change looks like. You're frozen for some reason. You don't believe for some reason. well, let's give it a little bit of spice. Let's give it a little bit of love here. And then, all right, let's turn up the heat. Let's do this together. To me, like that's always sort of been the path to what we call it a courage brand. I mean, I think every brand on the planet is somewhere between a coward brand and a courage brand. You've lived some of them, but it's like, how do we become a brand that's taking risks? And I think you nailed it when you talked about Craig saying, bring more safety to more people. That is a audacious, courageous, but clear marching order. So now how do we go about doing that? To wrap here, Elle, let's talk about you being a mom. And has that changed you? I mean, again, I don't, of course it's changed you a little bit, I'm sure. This isn't but like how has that helped you show up differently in life and in work? I'm curious what impact it's had on you.
When you were saying like, I wonder if your leadership style has been impacted by being a mom, I just kept thinking of like any time that not necessarily in a current role, but any time that I have to tell someone like, oh, the brand team can't work on the logo for your email signature. Like, I can see that you're having some big feelings about this. I do think that I don't really like any parenting doctrine per se, and I also think that parents are under so much pressure to show up a certain way. But there's one phrase that I like, which is sturdy parenting. And the analogy that's given around sturdy parenting is if you're on a plane and the plane is in trouble, like how do you want your pilot to show up? And imagine that. And so if the pilot comes on the air and says, we're going through a little bit of turbulence, but don't worry, I've totally got this. That's really different from if you hear nothing, or if the pilot brings you in on like exactly what's happening, which sometimes they do. But what creates safety in a situation where you feel out of control is something that I think about a lot. I have a 4-year-old, I have a 14-month going on 14-year-old. Honestly, he's running before he can walk, literally into things, including the swimming pool. But they, when they have big feelings, when they feel out of control, I try to anchor in my sturdiness. And I think that, having kids and going through, rebranding Ford globally, whilst also I was pregnant for a lot of that. I presented 2.5 hours at the board meeting in like the only thing that would fit me and also look vaguely professional. It's taught me that I can do hard things, like harder things than I even thought I could. And it's also taught me, I have a really simple mantra. I think I can't remember if I said it to you the last time that we spoke. Not a mantra, but just something that I always hold close, which is the deathbed test. Like when something's really hard, does it really matter? Like in the story of your life, does it really matter? And obviously my children are the things that matter the most. The other part of that is who's watching. When you're thinking about how things will be read, how things will go, I make this career decision. What will it look like? Who's watching? Is it LinkedIn? Do you care about that? Is it, or is it the perception of your children looking back on the choices you made and how it felt to be your kids? And so I think it's given me a really important lens for how I make decisions. But a part of that decision is that I absolutely love my work, and they see someone who loves their work, who sometimes travels for work, but we really talk about it. And I mean, my daughter is only 4, but she asked, we were out having dinner yesterday and she asked an adult if they knew what the word prolific meant. And then she corrected their definition of prolific and said that she was prolific. So, her ability to have these conversations is amazing. But, they see somebody who loves to work, who makes choices that I make choices that I value, that I respect, and I create the sense of safety for them too. And they're really, they're really happy, really social children who will go to anyone, and they know that I will, in the most important ways, always put them first. And it's felt really grounding. I think I've used the word grounding a few times, but it's felt really grounding to just totally know what matters. That's the gift that having children gave me.
It's a great way to sort of start the wrap here, and I honestly couldn't agree more. And I, you can't help but sit here and body jump into the choices you made in your life, and let's not discount that at some point you lived in another country that's not that close to the West Coast. I mean, it's not that far, but it's not that close. You can't just you made a choice to come here, and you've gone on this amazing adventure, and you just seem like someone that, and I'm sure it's like a lot of us, it sure seems like you got your shit together, you got your act together, and it's almost blasphemy to even acknowledge that maybe there's something you're afraid of, right? But this is the Courageous Podcast, and look, I'm a 50-year-old man. I'm still afraid of, like, am I gonna, because relevance slipping, like, is that the end of the world? Like you said, poor LinkedIn that got vilified here today, right? But poor LinkedIn for a moment. But, like, I still have fear. Like, am I making the impact I want? I so believe in our platform. I genuinely believe that it's like, there's no way to get to change without courage, and there's no way to be courageous if you don't address a fear head on. That doesn't mean every CEO wants to have that conversation. It doesn't mean every marketer wants to have that conversation. So for you, I'm curious, what is your, like, is there a fear that's like, you know what, Ryan, if I'm really honest with myself, the one thing that still scares the shit out of me is blank. What is that answer?
I think I can articulate this with enough simplicity that it's an answer. So a while ago, when I was inaugurated into the AAF and I made my acceptance speech, I invoked my grandmother, who was actually a self-proclaimed witch and really amazing, and lived her life in an incredibly courageous way and open to magic, and made all of these decisions. And I talked about, a little bit of some of the uglier side of things that I have seen growing up within marketing, the neo-capitalist complex, however you want to describe it. And that, I noticed that some of the people who I admire and respect the most left to either, attack from outside. People who were D&I professionals didn't stay in the industry. They left and they started their own practices, or they advocated, they became more activist on the outside. Or people who I just think of as really amazing female BIPOC leaders also left and started consultancies. And in that speech, I said, I am committed to being a different kind of leader from some of what I've seen, and, continuing to stay the course and not be somebody who holds the values that I hold, who either gets subsumed by corporate America or leaves. And I've asked myself whether that's still true and whether that's still possible a few times since I made that speech. And I give myself permission that I could, I have millions of ideas of things that I could do in the future, 10 years out from here. I'm not saying I must work in a corporate environment until I'm, at retirement age. But I do think, holding that commitment to building a better kind of capitalism, which was something I wrote on outreach to an ad agency when I got my first intern position. It was like what always motivated me was that marketing is the number one medium that people see in their lifetime, whether they have chosen it or not. And so therefore it is the greatest drivers of society's norms, whether that is intentional or not. And I would like to go into it with intention, given that I dropped out of art school because I realized that that wasn't the most relevant medium to do it with. And so that's why I'm here. And so, yeah, I mean, I just holding the commitment to building a better kind of capitalism as I get more senior, and as I get older, and trying to not let certain norms normalize themselves for me within my practice and my leadership. That's my biggest fear, is not staying true to that promise. And I do think that I will, but it's like the fear that motivates me to keep the promise. You know what I mean?
Well, the fact that you know it, you are way ahead than most, right? Like the fact that you have awareness, that's what you're driving to, right? And I get it. Like mine, Ryan Berman died with a lot of potential is somewhere where my fear lives, right? Like hearing that term, which is back to your deathbed commentary a little bit. Although I hear you. Hey, congratulations on everything you've become already and to what is in store for your future. McAfee's lucky to have you. Here's to momming. Here's to a little chaos magic. Here's to quietly important. And good luck on this quest with Craig and team to bring more safety to more people. And please keep us in the loop when you can share more. Maybe we get you back on the show in 6 more years from now, however long it took to get you on. But I'm glad we finally made it happen, and stay courageous out there.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Courageous Podcast. If you enjoy the show, don't forget to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts so more people can find us. See you again next week.